Hi everyone. Do you want to do something a bit different? I think today. Um, well, actually, this is kind of what I really wanted. What I wanted to do actually, and that is really try and do something a bit different, I suppose, and that is actually one of the things I've really wanted to do. Um, for everyone on Twitch and YouTube and everything. Hello there. It's a bit different today, sadly. I'm going to try and do really is I'm going to go through my book and go through this book, which you can easily get, by the way, online on Amazon. I've got this link in the description and all that jazz. And that is the... I think I can actually get rid of you as well. I don't think I'm going to need you. This one is my book, Liberating Life. What I'm going to try and do... There we go. That makes more sense. That makes it look a bit nicer. Is I'm kind of actually going to read through, really, if I'm honest. That's all it's going to be. I'm going to read through the last part of my book, I suppose, because in this book, which I wrote back in 2019, it was, year before COVID hit. I'm going to read through 12 rules, because there are 12 rules for life, which I wrote in this book. And obviously that's only in the last bit. You know, there's the whole extra bits in it, but last bit obviously is the bit where I actually get the things going, really. And I'm just going to go through in sort of it's in a weird fashion to try and well, I'm just going to read you through the rules, maybe have a little just sort of try and talk about it, really. And if you are interested in reading about sort of how I came to these things, and if you want to sort of read yourself, I suppose, then, as I said, the link of this book's in the description on Amazon. What we're going to do is just that. So hopefully it all makes sense and everything, but we're going to try it out. This is kind of what I wanted to do. Well, that's the plan, at least. Okay. So, if you actually have the book, then it's just chapter 20. Yes, there are 20 chapters, plus an epilogue and a prologue, so don't worry, there's plenty there. But I'm just going to go with rule 1. Again, these aren't that long, okay? But I'm going to try and see if I can... What's the best way of putting it? Sort of elaborate on them, I suppose. That's kind of the idea. This is really what I wanted to do, to be honest. On Twitch and stuff anyway. So let's go for it. So I've basically created, I call them rules, but they're guidelines, I suppose. If you're a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that's, you know, they're supposed to be taken, you could take it literally or figuratively. Really, it's not supposed to be something that you want to catch yourself out on, but as I said, all of these really have explanations to them throughout the book, really, because if you read just the rules, which I'm going to do, it'll just sound kind of archaic and sort of like, oh, where did this come from? But it'll all make sense, really, with the rest of the book, I suppose, in tow. So that's kind of what I want to try and do with Rule 1, which is sort of the name of the game of today. So basically, I go with the rule, and it has a tiny bit of elaboration, and that's what I'm going to do today. What are they about? Just quick before I start. What are they about? It's really just about general living. The book itself, Liberating Life, How Paying Attention Can Set You Free. The reason why I wrote it was well, I've always wanted to write a self-help book, I suppose, and that's kind of what it is. It's semi-autobiographical, but it's there to kind of just go, well, look, this is kind of what happened to me. These kind of things, lessons that I learned, and maybe some of them could be useful to you. That's really the crux of the story, I suppose. So there's a lot. There's chapters that are, I suppose, about my life, like anything. But again, it's more. It serves a purpose. It's not self-gratifying like some books around the place, if you know what I mean. It's more to do with trying to get some understanding. So you, the reader, will try and understand me. But also you can see some of the things that, well, to me make sense. And how I came up with the rules, ultimately. I actually have there's 12 rules for love, 12 rules for life. So we could go through the love ones too, and they're actually in the middle of the book, so don't worry too much. But we're going to go through the big ones, the big 12, which I made. In a tagline, I mean, there is a tagline at the back, but the tagline really is, I went through the experiences, so, like, you don't have to. I think. One of the main reasons why I wrote the book is actually born out of a phobia or fear. I'm not entirely sure which one. But definitely out of negativity. Real talk. That's what this is, really. And the real talk was, before I wrote this, one of my greatest fears, one of my biggest fears, I don't really talk about it a lot, talk about it here now, aren't I? Is I am afraid of death. I mean, it's a credible fear. I think everyone kind of has it. I mean, we try to just forget about it, but it's there. And what happened was, I just it was something that's just sort of stuck in my head, but not so much. Well, of course, it's that bit. You know what I mean? But it's more about what if something happened to me, and no one knew, not necessarily what I'd been through, but the kind of lessons that I learned that might be helpful for people. That's really it. I have a credible desire, need, if you will, to. I mean, like, literally, my job is a teacher at the moment. Whatever it is, years from now, I don't know. But really, it's always been. There's always something that I've learned, and I think would be helpful for people who either might listen, have similar experiences, or kind of don't want to go through the negative experiences and kind of want to get to the good bit. This is that good bit. Really? That's pretty much it. There's nothing else to it. Okay? It's not a self-gratifying, it's not me trying to make money. I've had this book out on Amazon for 2019, 21, 23, coming 3.5 years from recording this. 3.5 years. Okay? That's a long time, and it's not made me a lot of money. Not on the slightest. It was never meant to be. It was always meant to be something which I hope will be helpful for people at any time, years from now, if you will. Yeah, that's all it was. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to go through the 12 rules. I'm going to go through one in this video and another one next time, maybe on another Sunday. I don't know. And kind of talk about where it came from, as much without giving the game away, without giving it totally away. Okay. So I can give you the hyperbole at the beginning as well, really. In this final chapter, I shall leave you with these rules for living a free and meaningful life, free of the constraints that make us suffer, so that we can live how we always wanted to live. All of these rules have been inspired by one or more of the chapters you have already read, which I hope you will at some point read too. To my mind, adhering to these rules will help persuade you to take the higher path and not to fall for the expediency that is widespread in this world. Consider these like my 12 rules for love. I can't remember what chapter that one is. I think 12 or 14. Like guidelines, but may they serve as a reminder of the possibilities of freedom and the power to uphold that freedom we all have within us. Okay? Pretty simple, basic stuff. Rule 1. Okay, we're going to go through this, just one rule this time, and then we move on. Liberty is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. Paradoxical, I know. Liberty is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. Freedom to think and freedom to speak is not the summit of freedom. It is merely the tool we use to explore. If you are not free to think and speak, then you assume that you know enough. This is not the case. Remember that wisdom is the acceptance that we do not know everything, and we place a higher value on knowledge, yet to be personally discovered rather than the knowledge we have already. The wise sage isn't the fountain of all knowledge. He or she is the one who is humble enough to accept that there is much more to learn. We need freedom to do that. If the universe is infinite, then knowledge itself is somewhere close to that. We have no right to assume that we know everything, so we might close our minds. Liberty keeps the doors open to further enlightenment. The reason why the Dark Ages are called the Dark Ages is because we assumed we knew everything and that God was everything. As we discovered that this wasn't the case, science decided to prove that we are nowhere near knowing everything. This is why we call the next stage the Enlightenment. A light was shone on just how little we knew. And so we decided to start discovering things. In that time, the concept of liberty was also experiencing rapid growth, and hello, United States of America. Liberty grants us the opportunity to explore further and make the suffering of existence less with the advent of technology, medicine, philosophy, and so much more. Here we are today, not at the end, or even the beginning of the end, but merely at the end of the beginning of our search for wisdom of our existence. We've only got so far. Liberty is the beginning of wisdom, because without it we cannot learn any more. The freedom to act, think, and speak without any restrictions lifts the lid of perceived wisdom and shows it for what it really is. Search out the freedom in your own life, and you'll be open to the wisdom you truly need in order to help reduce the suffering you experience. Do not close your mind. Instead, open it. You have a long journey ahead of you, but it is a journey worth taking, so long as you are free to do so. Liberty is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. It's not complicated. It's, clues in the title of the book, I suppose. But it's very poignant, really, at this nowadays, I think. I think there's a lot of arrogance going on around the world. A lot of arrogance. Assuming that we know everything. The science is clear. Have you heard that before? The science is settled. And this is not really like a political rant. It shouldn't be a rant. It never will be a rant. But it is a warning. I think there's a weird paradox that's happening today. Like we're at our freest in the West and in certain places. We're at our freest, but we're certainly not acting like it. In a lot of actual free countries, we're acting a lot more like we should not be so. It's that assumption that we know everything, and because of that, we can then predict the future. And a lot of the times, it's a very bad future. Okay, which is ironic, seeing as back in the day, I think a lot more soothsayers, prediction people, I think a lot more positive. Okay, I think we were a lot more positive. There were reasons for that. I think our looking into the future was optimistic, because I think we were better at history in some ways. We were better at realizing that, look, we've come a long way, and there's more technological advances that are coming around, and who knows, in years to come we will cure diphtheria or child mortality. More people will be born, more people will have money, all that kind of stuff. That's a positive. That's positive. Even political theorists were much more optimistic. But somehow, recently, I'd say in the last 20 years or so, we've gotten incredibly pessimistic. And yet we've become also more sure of what's going to happen later. You can refer climate change or just any social issue that's been going on. Essentially, what you see in the news, which is basically negativity sort of on tap at 6 p.m, 10 p.m, or whenever you watch the news. I think it's born out of an idea that, look, we've got to the end of freedom. I think and that's it. We need to close up shop. But that was never the case. I think we assume that nowadays the only need for freedom is for it to get abused. I think we see that around like the internet. Okay, we now see it as like a threat. We call it hate speech. We call it harmful speech. We have a rule in this country which is legal but harmful, which now is actually a crime. Now, I don't think this is a call necessarily just to go, have at it. But we're becoming so sure of what is true or not that we then sort of shut things out, really. I mean, that's a really sort of weird way of putting it, but it is true. It's much easier to ban people for what they say rather than listen to people for what they think. We're more skeptical of these kinds of things, I suppose, but then again we are also more accessible, but then again we never weren't accessible. The idea that, the internet means that we are able to tap into people's minds, yeah, perhaps. But that was always the case. People could always talk to you. Beforehand, what we had beforehand was parenting. Pre going out into the world and having like access to information, your parents just go, look, here's some moral guidance for you, and then make up your own mind about what is good or not. Basically, that was our troubleshooting, I suppose, and that was born out of culture or something like that. I don't know what it was. There's lots of different meanings for it around the world, I think. But we haven't done that, and we assume now that people are ready to experience information in the world from a very, very young age. There are examples in the world of us trying to sort of not mature children at a younger age, but expose them to lots of things, and then go, look, they've been exposed at a very young age. Of course, there needs to be safeguards, but they need to be done by parents, not by people with the power to remove freedom, I think. We're very, very easy to say we've had enough freedom, but I don't think we are. There have been lots of times in history where we're like, we know everything now. Now we can start telling people what to do based on the perceived freedoms we've got to this point. And I think we've reached that in many parts of the West today, where we seem very trigger happy to tell people what to do. I think almost every single country in the world has never had as many laws imposed on it as it is today. I think governments and people are more suspicious of people than ever, despite the fact we have so much technology, we've learned so much in history, and actually the world is actually a much better place than it used to be. Yet we are told what to do in more and more of our lives. It's as if suspicion has increased so much to the average person. Now, I'm not saying that, trust everyone, but there needs to be a degree of trust generally. For example, here in England, we are the most. There are the most amount of CCTV cameras around here, more than any other democracy. I think that the world has become more suspicious, even though there's more of an ability to display the kind of goodness that we see around the place. You know, there's this sort of crippling fear that, oh my god, there's a nasty person behind every street corner, behind every clique. But I don't think that's the case. I think human nature, its default is to be kind. And if you give people the freedom to do so, then that's great. So there has to be freedom and liberty as a precursor, as a standard. And I don't think we like giving that. And if that's not the case, if we can't do that, then basically then we stop. Because we then assume we have all the wisdom we need. We don't. And that's actually a strength. It really is a strength. I don't understand why people are so afraid of not knowing. As a teacher, I can see so many students who are frustrated with not knowing everything. And I'm saying, well, one, you learn more from mistakes, but also that's where the fun lies. The idea about learning something new. And you can only do that if you're willing and open to realize that we still don't know everything. We have such a propensity just to go, no, I know everything. I know what's happening around me. I know my truth. God, I know my truth. Come on. As soon as you impose your truth, how you see the world, you give up your own liberty. Funnily enough, it's an ironic idea. We think as soon as we get all of this order, we put an assurance on everything around us. We think, now we're free to go about our lives. No, we're not. It's ironic. Every time we are sure about ourselves, sure about something that we see about the world, we place another chain because we're not going to change our mind. I know you're thinking, oh, but you created 12 rules. Yeah, but that's one of them. One of them is, you don't know everything. Okay, you really don't know everything, and that's a strength. Okay, sometimes people find anxiety in not knowing everything. You know, how do I know that, if I get on a plane that I might not die? You never know. We never know. I mean, my advice in that sense is go for the probability. In which case, you'll be fine on a plane. But no, you generally don't. That's a bit of an extreme example, but do you know everything about the people around you? Probably not. Do you know everything about yourself? Probably not. But you have to be willing to ask the questions, and you have to have the ability to ask the questions, and a lot of that comes down to being very humble and just saying, I don't know everything. And that's okay. That's okay. You shouldn't need to know everything. The only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. Yep. There's another one, a quote by, is it Lao Tzu or something, which is, a bowl is most useful when it is empty. I'm not saying that we all should run around as empty bowls, but it's worth having the ability to fill yourself up with more information. There's a bit in the book which largely inspires this, is when you're talking to people, just talking to an individual, how much do you actually talk to someone? And in a way, how much do you actually place value on talking to someone? I really, in this sense, I ask just one question. When you talk to someone, do you know, or are you able to acknowledge one thing, that they might say something, or they might tell you something that you didn't know that could change your mind? Now, if you talk to someone and have, I'm not going to change my mind, you're wrong in every way, or something like that, or I know everything, then you're not talking to someone, you're dictating to them. Okay? It's not so much the freedom of speech, it's the freedom to think and to think differently, or to be open to that thing that's differently. Lao Tzu, that's the one. You have to be able to think, okay, I have the freedom to talk to this person, but that's not enough. I have to believe that they might hold a piece of information, a key piece of information, to something that I think about, something that I think I know, or my truth, and it could change my mind. It's a very basic but fundamental way of talking to people. Okay? It's a basic, fundamental mark of respect. And you can always tell, I can always tell, when I'm talking to someone who has a closed mind, a closed shop. They go, nope, my life is absolutely the way it is, I've pathologized it, it's not changing whatsoever. I don't talk to them. Or if I do, it's going to be about the mundane, like the weather. And... well, that's no fun, is it? And that's what it's come to now. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom to talk, it also means freedom to listen. And the moment we say, well, no, we've spoken enough, what we're really saying is, no, we've listened enough. So the next time someone says, oh, the science is settled, I know what I'm talking about, just know that it's not the case at all. Even the smartest have been proven wrong. And the way that the people become very smart is by acknowledging that they are wrong a lot of the time. Mediocre conversation is draining. Small talk is fine. Small talk is there for the intelligent, really, to talk to people who aren't. So, next time someone says, freedom of speech is abusive, the inability to listen is probably worse. I have a recurring nightmare, which, by the way, has actually diminished since I wrote the book a bit. But it does come back every now and again, which is me being chased by zombies. It's a recurring one. It's very simple. The what do you call it? It's very scary. I'm actually absolutely petrified in this damn thing. But the same thing is, it's always the same thing, which is basically I'm there just before the outbreak, and then, of course, the ensuing chaos. Fear the Walking Dead is a pretty good example of that. And I really wondered why. And I'm not someone who's very good at analysing dreams. I'm not Freud. Not even Jung. I'm not even a psychologist. I got a B in A-level psychology, right? So I'm in no way absolutely smart at this. But I knew what it really meant eventually, which was I'm very afraid of people who stop listening, who are hurting themselves and those around them because they've given up the idea of liberty and wisdom. And not only are they causing chaos themselves, but it's growing, and that to me is pretty much that sums up in a way a lot of what's going on these days. It's just a lot of zombies, saying things or regurgitating things that I've heard in news, or people who assume we have got to the end of liberty, freedom, and wisdom by saying this is the way things are, and it's awful. Whether that's I'm not going to say it, but you can join up the dots. When you were young, when you talk to a child, one of the ways that a child can piss you off is they keep just asking why. Eat your food. Why? Because it's tasty. Why? Because that's the way I made it. Why? Because it's good for you. Why? Because I want you to stay healthy. Why? Because then you'll live longer. Why? That's actually quite a good way of going. It's a good line of inquiry to keep asking questions. And I think we've got to this a weird stage in an era of mass amount of information where there is a desire, a genuine desire, mostly among young people, a genuine desire to stop asking questions and to start saying, we know everything. We've stopped being inquisitive kids. We've stopped asking why. Because I think we're afraid of the knowledge we don't know. And we look for it. We look for people who we think know everything. And we have probably one or two people. The way really initially to avoid it, and this is the way it has been in history, is, I'm sorry to go on about it, but it comes down to parents. Back in the day, I'm sure well, hopefully, if you were very, very lucky, very fortunate, you had a father or mother, usually it's the father, that you think, oh my god, they know everything. What they say is absolutely amazing. And ask them a question and they'll just know. They might have, they may not know. I'm not saying that your parents knew everything, but you thought they did for a long period of time. I certainly did. For a long time. And then I realized, maybe this was during school or something, that they didn't. It's okay. It's fine. It's great. But it shatters a very, very immature, in some way, I think it's an immature idea that there are people walking around the place who know everything. And what we try to do is we say, okay, let's find them as politicians or something like that, or activists, or just anything. Let's just assume that they know everything. It's a really immature way of looking at it, and we assume that they're infallible now. But if you, at a young age, believe that your parents or one of your parents knew everything, then you realize they didn't, it helps you learn one massive lesson. No one knows everything. What happens is people know something, and that something could be useful, or it could even still be wrong. The people like Einstein, Freud, Jung, all these kind of people who we lift up as people who are good. It's not that they knew everything. It's just they found something out which people generally across disciplines, across cultures, across time still believed in. Why is you reference Socrates? Why do we still reference Socrates? Is because there are a lot of people around the world of different cultures across different time spans who still find this stuff relevant. It doesn't mean that they're true. Doesn't Socrates, we might not know that he's actually true, but it means something, and it continues to mean things across time. In that sense, we can perhaps find not truth, but something that we can agree on. Hell, that's how religions start. But we still have to be able to have the ability to go, is that true? Or is this part true? Or does this help me? Does this reveal something about me? Is this wrong? But we can only ask those questions if we have the ability to do so. And the ability to grow. And the ability to get it wrong. And get it wrong either because we misunderstood it or they did. But that's okay. What we did in the 1800s, and this is by one of my all-time favorite philosophers, Nietzsche, we didn't... He said, okay, we've killed God. No, what we did in the 1800s was we started to erode the very things that we believed initially, or beforehand, for a long time, to be unquestionable. We never questioned what was perceived to be God's will. Whether that be who's going to be our monarch, how much money we have to pay to the church, or indeed the rules, commandments that we had to abide by. That's the real God we killed, not the God that's up there or the ethereal being. We can't do that. But we killed off the idea that there are things that are beyond question. And that's why in the 1800s we started to develop a concept of liberty, freedom. That's why we eroded, over a long period of time, but we eventually did, barriers to that freedom, whether it be the right to vote, the right to think, the right to feel, the right to do whatever. Because we started to erode the principle of this is unquestionable. So why in God's name, ironically, are we trying to close that shop again? On a personal and greater level. The answer really is because it makes us feel safer. Because we seem to be now our own gods. Our religions are indeed ourselves. That's why we call it my truth. This is my truth. Because you are elevating yourself up to that God, really. So there's not a God that everyone believes in, but a God that just you believe in. I'm not saying don't believe in yourself. I'm not saying that. But you are not untouchable. Your mind is not untouchable. Anyone who tells you that it is, that you are fine just the way you are, we know we're not fine. We know we're not okay. But when people tell us you're fine, that's absolutely fine. You're doing a brilliant job. All these things, that's not always the case. By all means, be resilient, but at the same time realize that you're making a mistake sometimes. Negative feelings are just your brain going, oh, something's wrong. It isn't someone threatening your very existence. It's a call to make yourselves a bit better, but to realize one very important thing. You are not a god, you are human. And that's okay. When a mistake happens, when you don't feel good, it's okay to not feel good. As long as you feel it, you have the freedom to ask why. I think inability to comprehend is a big issue. Two people can listen, but if they don't understand, it's a futile attempt to communicate. Yep, that's a zombie. But it's an educational thing, but it's because people aren't given the building blocks ultimately to start questioning things. Some of it does sadly come down to your upbringing. So much of this stuff does come down to parenting. So much of this stuff does. But if you weren't privileged enough, be your own parent. Not difficult. People do it all the time. Just means you have to find your own examples. That's possible. It's a funny old concept, isn't it? The idea of freedom. We're scared of it. But I'm much more scared of a world where we wouldn't have it. Who knew you could get all of that from one little rule? There we go. There's more to it. Just in case you're wondering where that quote actually comes from, it came from, of all places, a video game. My favourite video game. I don't actually have something I can show you really what it is, but I can tell you what it is. It's a very good video game. It's a... Oh, when did it come out? But it's a Ubisoft game called Assassin's Creed Black Flag. was. But it was an interesting concept that they brought about, which was basically a pirate who was having a conversation with someone. I think I can actually have the quote somewhere in, I can't remember which chapter it is. Let's see if I can find it. There you go. Still on Twitch, where I'm streaming on Twitch. We are talking about a video game at some point. Which one is it? Ah, chapter 13. That's what it is. Ah. Okay. Yeah, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. It basically was having a conversation, really, which is about the idea of, oh, you know, if freedom is the best part of it, then why don't we chase every desire? If freedom is lovely, then why don't we do whatever we want? But that's not the point, is it? And there's a quote here: "For years I've been rushing around, taking whatever I fancied, not giving a tinker's curse for those I hurt. Yet here I am, with riches and reputation, feeling no wiser than when I left home. Yet when I turn around and look at the course I've run, there's not a man or woman that I love left standing beside me." It's what you do with it, not the mere art of having it. There's one more quote which I'll end this video with at some point, and I will get to it in a bit. Still in the same chapter, but that's sort of the other thing about it, really. It's not about the freedom to do whatever you want necessarily, and make mistakes along the way, though that is pretty much the course of life. That's called your 20s. Probably in your 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s. So, okay, you get the point. What you end up getting the best part of when it comes to freedom is that freedom to just ask questions, all that kind of stuff, but to realize that it's not just about being free, but it's about free to be doing the right things. What are those right things? That's what the rest of the book is for. We'll get to that a little bit. Actually, funny enough, that is a rule later on, and so I'll leave that as a cliffhanger, if such a cliffhanger can exist. But the concept of what do we do with the freedom that we've got, it's a curse, in a way. A curse. How free we are. You know, that idea of ignorance is bliss. Often I look at animals like dogs and cats. Well, more dogs really, and just think, how can you be so happy all the time? Cats, they're not happy all the time. In fact, they're more pissed off all the time, I think. It probably is something to do with that. Probably that ignorance is bliss, but dogs aren't free to do whatever they want. Would you want to be a dog? I mean, maybe for a bit. In my next life, perhaps, I'd quite like to be a, I don't know, Yorkshire Terrier? No. I don't think so. But essentially, a dog, if you think about it, is a very loving slave. They've got really no option but to be with you. You don't have a dog and go, all right, look, the door's open if you want to go. I mean, you can do it, and dogs will generally not go. But they mostly do it because they know that you're their main source of food, and love, and warmth, and treats. But it's more of a determined connection. They're not free to do whatever they want. I mean, there's a really good sort of general quote which I remember very well, which is, "It's better to be a poor free person than a rich slave," and I think that has a lot to do with that. And it's the wisdom to know which is what the difference is. I think the difference between this makes me feel free and this really endangers me to some kind of servitude. And one of those examples, which was really good, which I found out, but got a good idea of, or conceptual idea of, was like a wage. Like an employer gives you money, and you work for them. Now you might think, oh, that gives me the freedom to spend that money on things. Yes, to a point. But this was a great quote that completely ruined the idea of being paid by an employer, which is, a wage given to you is like the antidote or the poison, the antidote to the afflictions of ambition. And I thought that was brilliant. You know, a wage is a drug to stop you from becoming ambitious yourself, to taking risks, I suppose. It's a really interesting idea. The idea that what you get paid actually is stopping you from being free, stopping you from the wisdom that you could get somewhere else by, I don't know, being your own boss, starting up your own company, or doing something other than a job that doesn't really add value to life, to life in general. In some ways, that makes me feel a bit not happier, because as a teacher, you get paid nothing, like such a little amount. But the added value that I give is, well, I hope it's good. My students have got to listen to me. I do this, but on like a sort of subject level, so it's like low level, like self-help for them. I put it in a little bit in every single time. But if you can't see that what we think or we perceive to be some level of freedom actually is a lot less than what it could be, well, it might make you think differently about what you think is actually helpful. Okay? Maybe it's like a ladder. I mean, that concept makes absolute sense. You know, the idea that we're all on a ladder, we're all trying to achieve some more level of freedom. But in a way that, if we believe that, then we have to listen to our elders. They've managed to get there, haven't they? That's why old sages tend to be old. Look at all of them in films. When was the last time you saw a film with a very young, like, wizard saying, you know, this is your quest that you've got to go on? It's because they have had the liberty of wisdom for longer. So it's a time thing in some ways as well. So if you're young, don't beat yourself up with the idea that you haven't got there yet. Look, I haven't quite got to my middle age yet. And although this is helpful, my goodness me, I know that I'm no way near there yet. But I'd like to try to be. I'm not close, but I know I'm going the right way. I know I'm not smart enough. But I know that I'm trying. And there's so many people that are being told not to try. And it's hurting them. And there's so much stuff that's scaring them too. When you tell people to stop trying, it's awful. So I really hate people who are scaring them. And saying the world's going to be awful. It stops people trying. It makes them feel terrible. So yeah. Next time you listen to people who think they know everything and then start doom-mongering everything, just know that it's never like that's never the way. You don't get anywhere by scaring the hell out of people, telling them that they don't know anything and that you know everything, that science is settled, and go home, and calling you all different names under the sun. It's an evil way to be. And really what people should say is, let's think again, or think differently, or think how we can make sense of things. And realise we're not there yet. We're not even close. But let's accept one damn thing. It's that trying is much more important. It's a weird concept. And it's scary. We know it's scary, but gotta try. So we're getting to the end. I said I would do this one quote. I know I didn't actually plan for it. I really didn't plan. But I think it's a really good way of just ending this, and I think it's always better to end. I mean, technically, this isn't actually a quote that I made. This is a quote from the game, the video game. But it's the one closely associated with this rule. Okay? It's right at the end of the thing, but to me it's probably closely it really, this bit really sort of tries to sort of galvanize people to actually want to be at the beginning of wisdom rather than at the end, to understand that actually freedom is a fun thing to do and to relish the challenge, the adventure. That's what an adventure is. That's why we play adventure games. We do it because we want to learn more. We want to learn something new. That's why we start a book. We love knowing what's going to happen next. We've purposely selected a book and we're going to read it. We're going to see what we can learn from it. And in some way that's what we should do in life as well. Life is just a series of books on a shelf, and it's up to us which one we're going to take off the shelf and read, knowing full well that as soon as we finish it we're on to the next one. And it could be this one, but there's many better ones out there. And I think this, in a way, kind of sort of, maybe it's like a little call to action, I suppose, but a nice call to action, rather than the kind of stuff that you see all over the place. I'm going to end it with this. This quote at the end of the film, and I think at the end of this video too. I'll just get my closing bit for this. I can't remember which one it was. Yeah, that'll do it. It's a really good one. Men dream, but dreams hold no value here. What was the first bright light of hope has now turned into a long night of captivity. Lost in the dark, we surrender our minds and forget who we are. But some of us have woken up. They remind us that we all have a choice: to stand, not kneel; to oppose, not obey; to live, not just exist.